started. We'll be live streaming, so we're going to get started right on time. I got several things to share with you in terms of our prayer requests tonight. So, yep. I had students like you all that wouldn't be quiet when I got started talking. I had students just like you all. But the second semester, I didn't have those students. No, several prayer requests. Pray for Cindy, if you would. She's still, we shared with you on Sunday, she's been battling this bronchitis, upper respiratory for a good while, and she continues to battle it. So you pray for her. I think she goes back to the doctor Friday afternoon, and so be praying for her, please. Continue to pray for Janelle's family. That celebration of life will be here Friday morning at 10 o'clock, and so be praying about that if you would, please. And then pray for Jim Hicks. That's Kathy Alteri's dad. Any update, Kathy? Doing better. Great. He went to church tonight. Fantastic. Great to hear that. Continue to pray for Ruby Hart. She's still there at Life Care. And then this report for Sylvania's grandmother. Monday, she was able to get out of the hospital, and she is home and doing much, much better. The circulation, what they did on Sunday worked to this point, and continues to be going well. So that is a real blessing there. Pray for Johnny Smith. We got a text from him today that he was not feeling well and would not be able to be here, so be in prayer for him. Continue to pray for Lonnie Collard, that is Cindy French's dad. He's home from the hospital, and Joe has made it back here to the area. Cindy is going to stay there with her mom and dad for a little while. Multiple doctor's appointments, follow-ups that he has, and so she's going to be there with them, but you be in prayer still for Lonnie. And then pray for Thelma Rogers. I went by today and visited with Carson and Thelma. They're doing well, but Thelma, she has the difficulty with her eyes, and you're familiar with that. And she today kind of it begged me, really, in all honesty, that we would continue to remember her in prayer with her eyes and her vision. So pray for Thelma, if you would, please. So let's go to the Lord. Lord, we ask and pray that you would be with the names that are on this list, Lord, and the names that no doubt are on other hearts here today. Lord, I do pray for Janelle's family and that service on Friday, that you would be uplifted, that you would be able to minister to the hearts of that family. Lord, I pray specifically for Cindy, Lord, our pastor's wife, that you would just raise her up. Lord, that the appointment on Friday can go well, that she could begin to see some improvement. Lord, that you would just encourage them with good reports, but then, Lord, also improved health, I pray. Lord, I thank you that Sylvania's grandmother is doing much better and continues to improve with her circulation, and I ask and pray that that would continue to be the case. Lord, for Thelma and her eyesight, just ask that you would really encourage her and Carson. Lord, that you would just have your grace upon them, I pray. Lord, bless our time together tonight as we look to the Word of God. Bless our pastor as he delivers it. Lord, help our hearts to be open. May we learn from the Scriptures, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Just a couple of announcements. On Sunday morning, Brother Bill Davis will be teaching the Sunday school time. It's David in the Ark of God, right? Am I correct about that? Brother Bill has put that lesson together for us on Sunday. Looking forward to hearing that. And then the Men's Fellowship and Ladies Fellowship. Men on February the 4th. That's on Tuesday. Ladies on February the 11th, the next Tuesday. Both of those groups have lists out in the foyer. I know with the ladies, Tina Paul is going to be the guest speaker. I know that'll be a blessing, Tina, to everyone there. And so that will be for the ladies on the 11th with that. And then Widows and Widowers Luncheon, February the 14th. I'm looking forward to that. We're going to have some special little Valentine's type gifts for our widows and widowers that day, and just looking forward to being able to spend some time with them there at the diner at noon. And you will let Doris know of your intentions if you got that letter and that invitation for that. Also, just to give you these things to be thinking about and to know about in the future. Today we set the dates for basketball camp and for VBS. Basketball camp will be the 16th, starting on Monday the 16th of June, going through the 19th. And VBS will be the week before that, starting on the 9th. Not sure if they're going to the 12th or 13th, but it'll be that week before. 4 days of basketball camp's all I need. So we're going to close it out on Thursday, but that'll be starting on June the 16th. So be praying for both of those times. And there's a lot of logistics that go into those things, as well as the hearts of the young people that'll be here. So we'll be looking forward to a great time with both of those in June.
I was just thinking, we may need to get 2 cots set up in here for those 2 weeks, right, for you and I. It'd be crazy. It'd be a fun summer, but boy, those are, and Mark does all the work at the camp. But you get kids that age, they are so excited, so enthusiastic, and 4 days of that, and you're ready for a dark room, 50 degrees and Yanni music. Just let me detox from all of that. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun. Let me give you an announcement I didn't have a chance to give you, that you folks will, I think, be interested in, something I worked on today, and we got it done without an executive order. The only 2 people that know are Brandis, because I sent her something right before I came here, and then Joy. But I got a note from Jeff Harper of the Harper Agency. He sends them all the time. And he said the Wisnits are going to be in your area on February 16th. And they sang there once before and loved it. Would you have any interest of having them back? They would be happy to come just for a love offering. And so I got back and I said the 16th would have to be in the evening, and it looks good. But I said, here's how we do it financially. I said, when a group like that comes in, we give them a guaranteed $1,000. Then we take up a love offering, and we give the love offering to them, allow them to sell their products and merchandise and things like that. So Jeff and Susan and the Wisnits are on a gospel cruise right now with a bunch of folks. He got back to me within about 40 minutes and said, I already communicated with Jeff. They are excited. So February 16th, Wisnits, Sunday night, they'll be here. They're wonderful, wonderful Southern gospel group. They were on the cruise when we were with them, and good family group. You're wonderful people. They've had 13 or so #1 hits and all that. So that'll be a good night of worship. So we'll try to get a sign put up. You know the size of that sign out there? Okay, 5 by 10. We'll get something ordered and get it up there, and they've already got it on their website, by the way. So anyways, that's that. Thanks for praying for Cindy. I know she's watching. I don't know if it was Charles Swindoll or Charles Stanley who wrote the book, 2 Steps Forward, 3 Back. That's kind of what she's going through right now. A good day and all of a sudden a regressive day. And she had that yesterday and last night. So I actually had a doctor's appointment this morning, so she told me, I got to go with you. And so she does have walking pneumonia, but I mentioned to the doctor when we were in there, I said, shouldn't she see a pulmonologist? She's got a respiratory lung issue, and I think she needs to see a specialist. He agreed, so we were quickly able to set that up for Friday at 2 o'clock. So I'm looking forward to that. This has been a month. She's taken everything known to mankind and get a little better, but then she'll fall back. So appreciate your prayers much for her. You people that know her well, she is as social as a person as anyone I know, really. Our daughter Heather got it, and our grandson Luke got it. They're all, Holly and Joy are a little bit different. They're probably more like Dad, like that. Cindy loves the social things and being out and being able to be with people and that. And it's just been hard for her this last month. So we're praying for something good on Friday, and I appreciate your prayers. In our 5-week reading, and Lori, it's good to see you, our newest member. Good to see you tonight. That was great on Sunday. In our 5-week reading, we're going to finish Galatians this week and begin reading in Ephesians, reading 2 chapters out of the book of Psalms. But the bulk of our reading this week takes place in Exodus, an absolutely remarkable, historically accurate book, the book of Exodus. 400 years had passed since Joseph was made second in command by Pharaoh, if you remember. During the four following centuries, though, many Egyptian leaders had come and gone. Not quite sure how many. But in chapter 1 of Exodus, we find a new king. It kind of sadly says he knew nothing about Joseph. Joseph or his greatness and what he did for Egypt. Somehow his exploits had been forgotten by history. I hope that's not the case of things that take place in this country, that history is forgotten, or worse yet, it is rewritten to where it wasn't. But that's where we find ourselves in Exodus 1. We're told there that the initial number of Jews that came into Egypt with Joseph was 70 people. You find that in Genesis 46 and Exodus 1:5. The scriptures tell us that they had been fruitful and they greatly multiplied, and that the current Egyptian king now began to fear that their numbers had become so great that they were more than the Egyptians. And what if the Jews chose to take sides with an enemy? In his opinion, if that took place, they could overthrow the country. So we're introduced in Exodus, the first chapter, to what I call the first abortion legislation we find in the scriptures in the first chapter, the 16th verse. The Pharaoh is now issuing a couple of things. He's talking to the midwives that help the ladies deliver babies. He said, when you're helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that that baby is a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. In the 22nd verse, to those that don't use a midwife, he says, every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile or the river, but let every girl live. That was the edict that the new Pharaoh was giving, trying to curb the population of the Hebrew people. Well, the mother of Moses was a woman by the name of Jochebed. She's from the tribe of Levi. And when she gave birth to Moses, she didn't want to give him up. And she kept him and hid him for some 3 months. Then she must have worried about maybe being found out. So she made, you remember, that floating basket, placed him in it, 3-month-old Moses, then went and put him in the banks of the Nile River. And his older sister, Miriam, then stood at the bank to watch to see what might take place to her baby brother, which kind of had to be a horrible thing because of the crocodiles and other things that were there that could have destroyed Moses, and she would have watched it. But the daughter of Pharaoh comes down, you know the story, to bathe herself. She hears the crying of a baby. She sends one of her maids to check out where it's coming from. The maid brings the basket, she opens it up, and there is Moses crying. And the scriptures, as you read it, say she had compassion on him. Almost immediately, little Miriam runs over, and she makes a suggestion. You see it in Exodus 2:8-9. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, that being Miriam, go, and the maid, or to her maid when she heard the crying, go, and the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give you the wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Miriam runs over there, says, you need someone to nurse this Hebrew baby. She says, yeah, that would be great. She says, I can find someone for you. And she went and got her mother. And now her mother is brought in and paid money to nurse her baby. I've got down there, you talk about a range of emotions that day. How she felt when she made the basket and put her baby in it and set it on the edge of the Nile, what was going through her mind. And then before too long, Miriam runs home and says, Mom, you're not going to believe it. Let's go because they want to hire you, pay you to nurse Moses. I think about Romans 8:28. We know that all things, right? All things work to good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. She had to be absolutely rejoicing over what God had done that day. Well, Moses will spend the first 40 years of his life in absolute luxury, there's no way to put it, surrounded by the finest of everything that anyone could possibly want or imagine. And most scholars agree that Pharaoh was probably grooming Moses to possibly be the next Pharaoh. Stephen, in his message that he preached before he was stoned to death in Acts, the 7th chapter, gives us a little bit about this. He said Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. Now, when you read that, we're going to look at the 5 excuses that Moses gave to God as to why he can't be the guy to lead Israel or lead the Jewish people out. Remember one of the things he said? My speech. And here Stephen is saying, no, he was raised and educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and in action. Well, one day Moses saw an Egyptian beating one of the Hebrew men, and in his anger, he came to his rescue and he ended up killing the Egyptian and he buried him in the sand. The next day, the Hebrews who saw what Moses had done called him out on it. And Moses began to fear that Pharaoh would find out, and he fled for his life. You read about that in Exodus 2:15. Pharaoh heard of this, about Moses killing the Egyptian. He tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. And while he's sitting there is when he's going to be introduced to the daughters of Jethro in Midian. Well, he's going to spend the next 40 years of his life living in Midian, working for his father-in-law, Jethro, as a shepherd. Think about that. What a life change. Married to one of Jethro's daughters, Zipporah. Goes from the lifestyles of the rich and the famous. Remember that show in the 1980s? He goes from that to now, for 40 years, assuming the position of the lowly job of a shepherd. You got to say, what was God doing? What was God doing through all of this? Pharaoh had been grooming him for 40 years. Now it was God's turn to groom Moses, to hopefully get him willing to perform what will be the greatest responsibility of his life, leading the Hebrews out of Egypt and hopefully into the land that God had promised to them. Well, all of that's a backdrop, okay, to my lesson tonight. Because here's what I want to focus our lesson on this evening. And that's why I've titled this message in the way I did, Inadequate and Inferior, but Not in God's Eyes. For anyone who feels insecure, inadequate, inferior, which unfortunately is a lot of people, that is not God's opinion of you. I want you to know that. He made you in his image. You're wonderfully made in the image of God. And if you allow him, he'll do great things for you, in you, and through you, for his honor and his glory. But you've got to get away from that feeling that you're totally inadequate, you're inferior, you can't do anything else. Lord, why would you want to look at me? And I cannot tell you how many people in my lifetime I know who feel like that. And for most people, it's been maybe one or two incidences in their life. Someone embarrassed them at an age when they were trying to do something they really liked. And the embarrassment was too great to deal with, and they said, I'm not going to try that anymore. Words were said by probably someone who was jealous. Jealous of what they saw in that other person. So the jealous person said some sharp words and hurt them so badly, they just feel like they're inadequate. Listen, it's easy for that to happen if you're not careful. I don't think Holly's listening, but she'll find out about it. Holly's a wonderful piano player. For those that remember, our pianist here for many years, Trellis Arnold, she gave piano lessons to all three of my girls. Anyone in here get lessons from Trellis other than Brandis back there? Raise your hand. Okay, Brandis, come and play for us. Holly's very good, very gifted. Heather and Joy can play, but, you know, Holly's good. She was going to play the offertory here on a Sunday night. Now, she had practiced and played this song so much that Cindy and I could have played it. We had heard this thing, and she was great at it. Was anyone here that night? I don't know. Barbara was. I don't know. Bill, you and Patty may or may not have been. I don't know. Well, I was sitting down here. The ushers came forward. We were taking up an offering then. Holly got up. Trellis moved, and Holly sat down. And I could see my daughter, and she was just sitting there like, what am I doing? Prayer ended. Holly just sat there. Ushers were making their way back. Holly just froze. So finally, I got up and walked around, sat on the piano, put my arm around her and said, do you want to play? She said, I can't, Dad. So I just looked at everyone and said, that's the song. One thing like that has got her to where she would be fearful of sitting down there to play anything in front of anybody. Doesn't take much for those that know what I'm talking about. A word, an action, something like that. We had a guy in high school, Ken Henry. He didn't start. You couldn't beat this guy in horse. He was unbelievable. But you put him in a game, and he was so afraid of making a mistake in front of people who had paid to see the game, you couldn't put him in. You've seen people like that. I know you have. I know you have. Listen, God made you in his image. He's got things that he wants you to do for him. Things that you would have never imagined possible for yourself. But through him and by him, you could do it. You know, our human nature is such that people only tend to see their flaws, their shortcomings, their inadequacies, and their sin. But God sees something very different. He sees what you and I could become if we yield to him. We may see a broken life, but God knows he could put it back together. Used entirely for his honor and for his glory. I hope that's how people see themselves today. I don't know how many years ago it was, but I was up at Liberty University for 2 days speaking to their graduate students. I got a great thing I do on a 2-day leadership thing of Moses. Tremendous leader. I think the greatest leader Israel had. We're going to learn some things tonight. How do you start out like he did and become Israel's greatest leader? Well, you know the story. He's now tending sheep in Midian. He's out in the desert by the mountain one day, and he sees a bush on fire, but it's not burning itself up. It's not being consumed. So he approaches the bush out of curiosity, and all of a sudden, the bush speaks and calls out his name, Moses. Imagine what that felt like. And then the voice says, Moses, take off your shoes, for the place you are standing right now is holy ground. And he realizes it's God that is speaking from this bush. Well, God's going to have a long conversation with Moses from this bush. And he's going to ask Moses to be willing to be his mouthpiece, go back to Egypt, the place he fled from, ask the current Pharaoh to let the Jewish Hebrew people go, then lead them out into the promised land. God wants Moses to be promoted from the shepherd to now his leader. What a promotion. What an offer. But here's the problem. God is not going to force him to do this. Moses has to be willing to say, yes, Lord, I will do that. Will this 80-year-old man say yes to God? Or try to bring up all the excuses to God as to why he's inferior and inadequate, too old, and too unable to do the will of God? Well, you know the story, but hang with me because we're going to look at these things. During the conversation, God will give Moses evidence that it is God who is speaking to him, and that God is powerful enough to empower Moses to lead his people. Two different things you remember that he asked Moses to do just to prove this. Moses, as a shepherd, would have been carrying a staff, probably 4.5 to 5 foot tall wooden staff. God tells Moses, you see that thing you have in your hand? He says, yeah. He says, throw it on the ground. Moses did, and immediately, whatever length of that staff was, it turns into a snake. What I call the greatest act of faith possibly in the Word of God is what happens next. Because God tells Moses, pick it up by the tail. Pick it up by the tail. Moses does it, and it turns back to his staff. God says, Moses, take your hand and put it into your coat, into your bosom there. Now take it out, and it's leprosy, pure white. Put it back in. He does. He brings it out, and his hand is normal again. Amazing. Two things that God tells him to do, talking from that bush. But none of these divine miracles or words from God himself out of this bush that's not being burned up seems to make a dent in the inferiority complex that Moses has developed over the past 40 years. Not in my notes. This is one of the reasons I tell people don't stay in an abusive relationship where somebody's trying to tell you you're no good, you got no value to anything, you can't do anything right. And I know about it because my sister was in that up until she died. And I saw what it did to a girl that graduated number 1 in her class, got a full academic scholarship to Michigan State University. Then that summer got pregnant with a guy she'd only met one night. And her life from there was just a slippery downward slope. No physical abuse, but the verbal abuse was amazing. To the point, and I'm not ashamed to tell you, that my brother and I went to our brother-in-law, and we threatened him. If you've seen Kenny, he's a pretty big guy too. We hear you saying any more things about our sister the way you are, we're going to be back. And to Dick's credit, he stopped. But I saw what it did to her. 40 years as a shepherd, he was trying to get out from under this to say, I can't believe that this is what he wants me to do. Well, the first thing he says is, Lord, I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing, we're going to see. We look at the King James, the New King James, New International Version, all of these things. That's the Kreisman version. I'm a worthless, sorry dog. Why do you want me for anything? Lord, I am a nobody. Look at Exodus, the 3rd chapter, verses 11 and 12. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? I smell like sheep. God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said, listen, no, I'm not the guy. If your opinion of yourself this evening is one of inferiority, you did not get that from God, the one who made you. You did not get that. You were wonderfully made. You have such tremendous value that God sent his only begotten Son to die for you. That's the kind of value you have today. Instead of thinking I'm good for nothing, there's nothing I could do, why not yield to the Lord and see what he will do with your life? That's the first objection that Moses brings. Why me? I'm not the guy. Secondly, Moses tells God, I have no authority over these people. Why are they going to listen to me? Why are they going to want to follow me? I've got no authority over them. Why in the world are they going to believe me? Look at verse 14 of chapter 3. God said to Moses, I am that I am. And God said, this shall you say unto the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you. Your job, Moses, is not to worry about building up yourself and promoting yourself with your flashy resume, but you're going in my name. You are coming in my name. You're enabled by my power. And that should be a good lesson for everyone who stands behind a pulpit. We're not there to build ourselves up. We're not there to make ourselves look good. That's why I've said for 15 years, if we ever get Gwinnett County to agree to another sign, I would never want my name on it as the pastor. This is his church. You know, you don't need to build a pastor up. But boy, that's uncommon today, isn't it? Ask people, where do you go to church? And they give me a name of the pastor. My follow-up question is, have you ever met him? Almost all have said no. Those that have said yes said one time, kind of in a visitor gathering, got to shake his hand. That's not someone who smells like sheep, is it? Be careful. He said, Moses, don't worry what they think about you. You're coming in my name. Thirdly, Moses said, the people are not going to believe that you sent me. Been out here 40 years in Midian. I ran for my life. I'm watching after sheep. And now these people are going to believe me that I'm here because you sent me. That's when God performs those two miracles we talked about. Throw down your staff and put your hand in your bosom. Moses, you're talking to a burning bush. Now I've performed these two miracles. What is it going to take for you to believe me and to trust me? Question we should ask ourselves every day. It really is. Good question for every one of us. How much does the Lord have to do for us in order to get us to be faithful? Really. What does he have to do in order to get us to be excited about coming to his house? Well, Lord, I'm excited to see you here tonight. No, it's hard on Wednesday nights for everyone to get here. But what's it take to get people to say, I want to be faithful? As long as it's in my power, I can get there. How much is God going to have to bless you? Not just financially, but with your health and your friends and a lot of other things, your job, in order to get people to say, you know, giving 10% is an easy do. Why wait until something happens? I've talked to too many people in my life who will tell me, I think the reason this is happening to me because I quit going to church, I haven't given, and I haven't done this and this and this. Those seem to be the first things that come to their mind when all of a sudden the road gets a little tough for them. How much does the Lord have to do for us in order to get us not to worry about what does he want me to do? Lord, you want me to go right now? Fourthly, the thing I like about that, Mark, with his emails. We'll talk, and we were emailing last night, texting last night. Kentucky was playing Tennessee in basketball. And of course, Mark and I were doing our couch coaching, weren't we? Texting back and forth, and this kind of stuff. Well, the last thing I said to Mark was, game was over, Kentucky won, they played a good game, they deserved to win. I said, listen, I'll see you tomorrow night. And he sounds like Vern Lundquist in the text. Yes, sir, is what he puts in there for me. And I thought, isn't that what we should do? When God speaks to us and directs us, shouldn't we just say, yes, sir, I'm going? His next excuse showed again his lack of confidence and inferiority. You see it in the 4th chapter, verses 10 and 11. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. Now remember what we read in Acts 7? I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Most people attribute that to maybe a stuttering problem. The Lord listens to that, then the Lord comes back. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Moses, that is a small thing. when you go in my name and do what I am asking you to do, I will speak through you. You won't have to worry about what to say or how to say. We hear that a lot in ministry. People feel like, well, I can't do that. Someone else is a whole lot better than me. And we hear that time and time again. Have for a long time. Well, there's the last excuse. Please, Lord, send somebody else. Exodus 4:13. But Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord, please send someone else. 80 years old, he had lost complete confidence in himself. He would remember his 40 years, especially in his 20s and 30s, what it was like being in the palace, all of the things he had access to and available to, the intelligence he had gained from being there. Now 40 years tending to the sheep, he's got absolutely no confidence. And he finally just says, Lord, just send someone else, will you? And I thought, if you were interviewing someone for a job that you thought they could do a good job at, and you had to answer this many objections. Now listen, I grew up in a sales position. I don't mind objections. I like them. To me, they've always been buying signs. You have an objection? Great. Let me answer it, and we'll get through that. Now we can get to how we close the deal. Other people, when they hear an objection, just fall apart. They don't want to hear that. If I was interviewing someone and they were this hard to convince, I wouldn't hire them. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't hire the person that came jumping up on my desk that really hadn't done a great job in their past performance saying, I can do this. Well, past performance is a good predictor of future success. But here's Moses. God saw something in that Moses didn't even see. Get somebody else. What I found interesting, if you were to approach someone like Moses in today's culture, and without telling a whole lot other than the fact, and by the way, Moses, this is going to pay $500,000 a year. Give me the job. Give me the job. Well, what happened to those excuses? I want that money. Give me the job. Whether they can do it or not, whether they're going to fail miserably, they want that money. But you ask them that in the vein of a ministry or serving the Lord, and you get nothing but questions. Nothing but questions. It was after offering this fifth excuse that you'll see in your scriptures that the scriptures say God became angry with Moses. He became angry with him. And then he told Moses, listen, you can take your brother Aaron with you. And if need be, he could speak for you. And that seemed to close the deal. God took an 80-year-old man and over the next 40 years made him what I believe the greatest leader Israel ever had. Really the world might ever see. His leadership qualities are exceptional. Through the advice of his father-in-law, he began to delegate responsibilities. He began to do things that other people were not doing, managing these 2 million people. A man, by his own admission, who was only capable of taking care of the sheep, ended up taking care of some 2 million Jewish people. Wow. How did he do that? He just said, yes, Lord. I'll go. You got to go before me. You got to do everything in your power to enable me. You know, he's not the only reluctant person we find in the scriptures. Jonah was, you remember that. I preached about that a couple of months ago. Gideon, when he was hiding, threshing his wheat, and the angel of the Lord approached him and said, Gideon, you mighty man of valor. And he broke his neck looking around and said, you got to be talking to someone else. He was like that. Esther was. Saul was. He was hiding when they were going to make him the next king. Jeremiah, Elijah. A lot of folks in the scriptures were not that much different than Moses. You like the ones that say, here am I, Lord, send me. Here am I, Lord, send me. The ones that are willing and ready to do something. one of the neat things about Dale and Kayla, as Mark said it last week, when they came to us, they had a desire, really burning to do something for the Lord. Didn't know quite how to do it, or quite what it may eventually look like, but they said, here's what we've been thinking and praying about. What do you think? And we'll take the lead in it. Wow. You know how unusual that is in ministry. But Moses wasn't alone. Moses spent his next 40 years leading Israel. Then he died. He never got to go into the promised land. But we say he physically died. Because you remember, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up into the mountain. So some little executive leadership training. And while they're there, all of a sudden, Moses and Elijah appear, and they hear the voice from heaven saying, this is my son. Moses was there. Listen, I'd rather have my name written in the hall of faith than the hall of insecurity. Any day. Any day. Well, you may make some mistakes. I have. I made plenty. I'm in 3 Hall of Fames. And the best year I ever had shooting percentage was 58% from the floor. You can figure the next rest out how many times I missed. But as the saying goes, a shooter has no conscience. You know that, don't you? Yeah, we were playing Duquesne, and I missed my first 6 shots. They had a guy playing guard that game who ended up playing for the Lakers for a number of years, Norm Nixon. We called the timeout, and Coach looked at me, and he said, you're not loose yet. You need to shoot more. That's exactly what he told me. Music to a shooter's ears. Music to a shooter. Listen, I've made plenty of mistakes, but it's never stopped me from doing what I think and believe the Lord wants me to do. Never. Never. Don't worry about it. I'm going to look foolish. Someone's going to say no if I start to share my faith with them or invite them to church. Don't worry about that. You do the work and let God give the result. I just don't think the fear and the inadequacies that people have, I know they're not of God. That's why 2 Timothy 1:7 tells us that God has not given you and I the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So whenever, and I have had it, fear come, I know it's not from God. I know it's not. And that's how you should believe too. Not from him. The enemy's trying to convince you that you may make a mistake. May not be perfect. I had a trombone solo in high school. I used to play the trombone, and I was pretty good at it. Long arms helps, you know. Well, we're doing sleigh ride. Dun, 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 dun. You know, and there's a part in that where the trombones go bum, 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 bum. I started, man, and I couldn't get my breath. I couldn't get anything out. And the conductor's going like, looking at me like, what are you doing? I finally got back on the page. I didn't let it bother me. I didn't quit and say, I can't play anymore. People are going to laugh at me, all this kind of stuff. I can't do that. I was in the play Brigadoon in high school because I could sing. So I was Charlie Dalrymple. So I had to wear this crazy fez and dress up like this Scottish guy. Well, my buddies were all doing the props back behind the stage. I had to sing this love song, come to me, bend to me, da-da-da-da, you know. And while I was doing it, my buddies had these long pea shooters. They were shooting peas at me on stage. I could have killed them. It disrupted me for a little bit, but I got back into rhythm. Listen, don't worry about the mistakes. When you're doing your very, very best, trying your best, don't worry about it. Learn from them. Keep moving. But don't fear. God hasn't given you and I the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Moses did his best to try to talk God out of that. But he finally said yes. That's what God wanted to hear. He wasn't going to force Moses to do this. I don't know who he had in the dugout. on deck. Maybe it was Aaron. I don't know. But Moses said yes. And what he accomplished was absolutely amazing. What do you think you and I could accomplish? Doesn't matter what age. Just matters about the type of faith we have. That's the difference maker right there. Do you believe it? Do you trust it? Are you willing to do it?